Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. As you can tell from the top left here, it is the Crimson Harvest Week, which is the ongoing event. I'm participating in that. I am planning to get the 1000 points and at the moment I'm at 500 plus. So I'll pretty easily get there with about 100 points a day, which is not that difficult. I think if you get 2 full gauntlets, that means 3 bosses, that gets you very close to those 100 points. Perhaps you have to do like 1 more gauntlet side to kill some extra blood raiders for the kill 10 of them. But yeah, very accessible event in my opinion, although a little bit harder than the Rogue Drone ones. And for alpha clones, I think you'd recommend a battleship in order to run the gauntlet. But what I do like is that it gives you far more options than the previous events, because you of course also have the mining sites. You've got the mining option in order to earn points. And overall, yeah, definitely a nice event. 2 problems in my opinion. Number 1, of course, the loot table mishap. That is quite unfortunate, going from absolutely incredibly good, way too good in fact, to absolutely nothing. And now finally finding a bit of a more balanced situation. I think I'm still getting decent ISK from time to time from the gauntlets, with the boosters being worth tens of millions from time to time. Although I do think that a lot of those will be dropping in price if I see what I'm getting for the decently low effort that I'm putting into the Crimson Harvest at the moment. With 500 points, it also means that I've got the Astero skin and the Gila skin. Those are the ones that interest me most. Then we still have Macarial and Avatar, 2 ships that I don't regularly fly, and I think the Avatar one I'm just gonna try and sell for ISK as well. But I like this type of event. I like that you can take your time. You don't have to spend too many hours every single day in order to get the maximum number of points. And if you really want to, you can just keep grinding and earn all the points in like a day. I think some people did it in a day, and yeah, that works as well, which I find very good in these types of events in EVE Online. I haven't done any of the mining options just yet. And here I personally think that for the skill point boosters, that it's not a good change, that they added like a whole industrial layer there. I think I can understand their thinking. They're basically saying we already have something for the combat oriented pilots, we've got something for the miners now. Let's also try to create a branch for the industrialists of New Eden, give them a chance to either gather or maybe buy those resources, then create the boosters, try and sell those at a margin. But I think that for boosters that expire for an event that doesn't last that long, that it's too many extra steps, it's too much hassle in my opinion, and I just completely don't focus on the boosters for this one. We'll see how it works out, but that's just my opinion on this event. Great overall, too bad about the loot mishap, although I got some nice items out of that. And the manufacturing of the boosters, I think, is maybe made a bit too complex. If you want to add such a layer, make it a bit more simple, or well, just, you know, don't do it, have them drop so you can inject them. That always feels really good, that you find a nice boosters, you inject it and you're good for the next 24 hours or the next 48 hours. In my opinion, that is still the best way to go for the event. I'm a little bit biased, granted. I do like the combat side of it myself. Next up, we'll take a look at the New Eden store. And what do we have? We do have the new Headhunter skins coming to the store. I think that they've dropped from an event before, and this might be their first introduction in the New Eden store. I think they look really good on some ships, especially stuff like here, the Omen, the Oracle, that looks crazy good. And this is definitely the week for the Headhunter skins on the New Eden store. No sales visible. So nothing that really interests me too much myself for a personal purchase. What I always do take a look at is the 30-day Omega clone time. If you get something extra there, I do feel like it's really something that you're getting extra for your subscription, for your support for the game, and that is one that I usually jump on when I see the chance. But this week, no sales. It's all about the Headhunter skin. If you don't have them, or if you still need to fill your library, this is a chance to get them. which means that we can move to the market itself. As always, we're going to start with some plex and stuff, and that's going to be at 5 minutes. 500, and you may already have been able to tell from the ticker, but Plex has made a pretty big move up here, quite a sharp increase in price to more than 3.25 million on the chart. In JITA itself, we are selling for almost 3.4 million. Buyers are up to almost 3.3 million. That is a pretty serious increase in price, and there is a bit more difference that's starting to show as well from the trade hubs. 3.3 million for the sellers, just above that, and the buyers though are at 3.3 million as well. So a very nice jump up in Plex. I know that there is one viewer who on this dip here at around 2.8 million ISK said, I put all my ISK in Plex. This is looking like it was a really good choice, a really nice investment. We're not at a 1-year high point, but if you start to get close to 3.5 million ISK, that is probably where you might get interested in unloading some of your Plex. The swiftness of this increase in price here in the last 10 days or so is quite surprising. That is quite a sharp increase. Next up, we have the multiple pilot training certificate. Same thing, although it's more of a recovery from the latest sale, but it is also going up to more than 1.2 billion ISK at the moment. Basically a very nice seesaw to 1.25 billion that has been done 1, 2, 3, 4 times in the last 6 or 7 months or so. That's some nice trade potential. The problem, of course, with the pilot training certificates are the volumes. They're so much lower than Plex that it's very tricky to time the market and to get a lot out of those sales. So my personal idea on this would be try to buy those bottom prices, only buy a couple, and then try to sell at the highest prices. But don't buy 100 of them. Gonna have a very hard time selling all of those at a profit. So here we are still selling for more than 1.2 billion. Buyers are coming close to 1.2 billion. That narrow margin on this increased price is quite interesting for me personally. It does mean that basically there is a lot of demand here and that the prices are going up. The recovery from the sales in the training certificate is pretty obvious, but I think that will break the norm. If Plex are any indication, we're clearly above the average for the year and working on potentially a 1-year high as well. Next up, we have the skill extractors, mirroring Plex very closely, of course, and same thing here, going for 380 million ISK. The 1-year high point is like 390 plus, almost heading for 400 million, 375 for the sellers and 369 million for the buyers. That's quite a sharp increase in price here, yeah, we even have averages so far that apparently are above 380 million ISK. Why would that be the case? Well, JITA itself is selling for 383.5, and I guess that it finds buyers at this price as well to create this average here so far. So very interesting situation. A very sharp increase in the price of Plex, an increase in demand. Did Vegas manage to galvanize the player base enough? Are they coming back? What would that be for? Perhaps the group content in Abyssal Dead Space. I do think that it is a bit more accessible, very interesting, and potentially, yeah, some nice co-op PvE. There's also Nullsec, of course, where you'll have a completely new industrial branch and a setup of industry and the new infrastructure that they have to do there with the new Upwell structures. There's definitely work to do there and perhaps a reason for some players to come back as well. Looks like it's the case because this is a sharp increase in price. Let's see if this finally has an impact on the large and the small skill injectors, and well, hardly noticeable. It's a slight uptrend just above 700 million ISK, but it's really nothing too crazy despite the massive increase in the price that they should now have for buying these skill extractors or buying Plex for their characters. This is basically staying steady. This to me does indicate that there is this inertia between the investments required to create your skill point farm, which is of course Plex and skill extractors, and the delivery of these skill injectors themselves, that creates this delay between the increasing price for the extractors and the price for the injectors. Very interesting. Still selling for 728 million ISK. Buyers are coming in at 704. And if you can grab something in between that close to 704 mark, I actually think that this is still your chance to invest in something that will potentially go up in price significantly. And we see the signs of that because, well, plex and skill extractors, it's a part of the price, in order to create these large scale injectors. So you can see that the margins must be under pressure at this point, and that I think at some point it is almost inevitable that these will go back up as well. Small scale injectors, same thing, a bit more volatility on the chart here, trying to edge its way back up a little bit in price, but still selling for 147 million. Bars coming in at a bit above 140 million. Feels really cheap if we look at this chart and we compare it to the skill extractor chart. So I think that this is still your opportunity to invest in the plex related items if that's what you want to do. The daily alpha injector is continuing to work on a pretty strong month here so far, constantly trying to edge its way back above 60 million ISK, 60.6 million for the sellers and 56 million for the buyers. And now I did put a JITA filter on a couple of the last ones. Let's see if that changes much. For the small scale injectors, it does go down to 143, so you'll very easily grab some small scale injectors below 145 for instance. And for the large scale injectors, it goes down to 715 to 716 million for the sellers. Again, compared to JITA, quite a narrower margin, but also a better chance to grab some low price skill injectors in my opinion. Interesting situation, far more volatility than I thought we would see, but it does look like eVegas might have struck a chord with a decently large amount of players. Next up, we have the mineral market coming in at 1150. Like that here. More good news in my opinion. We do see that titanium has stemmed the bleeding and is trying to get back towards 5 ISK, which is an average price, an okay price, not a great one of course, especially compared to the almost 8 ISK that we had up here, but it's still a price where, yep, you can mine titanium, you can actually feel okay bringing it to the market and selling it. So we are talking about 496 now for the latest seller. The volumes are still quite high, 2 billion, 2 billion, 2 billion. That's a lot for the market to get through, but at least it is closer to 5 ISK. This is a reasonable price for your titanium. 472 for the buyers, forced up a little bit as well. The bad news is of course only 500 million in the volumes there, so we do have that pressure on the price, but a bit of a recovery, and hopefully we can maintain a price close to 5 ISK. If we go a lot lower, then I just don't sell. Next up, we have pyrite. Same thing, right? Try to finally work its way back towards 4 ISK. It's not lasting very long. Pyrite has been on that year-long downward spiral to ever lower prices. It's now the cheapest mineral in the game at 370 for the sellers, 359 for the buyers. Very difficult market for pyrite at the moment. It just basically becomes the byproduct of so much other mining activity, whether it's nullsec, whether it's moon mining, that there's so much more of it than is needed in the game, that you have this kind of a price range which is super low. You can get far more titanium an hour than you can get pyrite an hour, and yet the price of pyrite is lower than the price of titanium, which in my opinion indicates that just there's not as much use for it, and it's just being created massively when people are focusing on other things. In moon mining, for instance, you're focusing on the Tech 2 materials and potentially Zydrine and Megasite, but yeah, pyrite just keeps coming from those activities as well, and as a result, well, maybe not the Tech 2 materials, but the Zydrine and the Megasite for sure, and that is where you get this type of situation where something that is less common than titanium is actually lower in price. Next up, we have Mexalon that also stopped the bleeding and is now trying to hold on to a price of a bit above 60 ISK. Apparently 62.58 for the sellers and 59.70 for the buyers. A bit low for my book. This is not a price where I would sell my Mexalon at. I'd be looking for a price of 65 plus. That I would call an average price where you could sell. 70 is definitely the okay region, and then 70 plus is really nice. But this feels a little bit low for me to sell the Mexelon that I might create. Next up, we've got Isogen. More very bad news. Isogen and Pyrite basically in the same terrible situation where normally Isogen should be more expensive than Mexelon, but it is far cheaper because, well, again, there's less use for it in the economy. You always need less Isogen to produce something than you need Mexelon, but it keeps being a byproduct of a lot of the other mining activities in the game. And so it's at a 1 year low point yet again, selling now for 16.13 ISK, and the buyers are coming in at just below 16 ISK. That is just, if you remember Isogen a couple of years ago, this is completely bonkers. This used to be a mineral that was substantially more expensive than Mexelon, and that was actually sometimes decently tricky to find. And now it is in this terrible state, a 1 year low point yet again at a crazy price of around 16 ISK for Isogen. Next up, we've got Noxium. As expected, it's trying to hold on to 300 ISK, but it's just failing. And I think that the 250 to the 300 ISK price range, maybe 275 to 300, is unfortunately the next leg for Noxium. Currently selling for 295 ISK, and the buyers are coming in at 280 ISK for Noxium. So it's below average. You know, considering this whole chart, it's still probably okay to sell because I think it's inevitable that we're going to keep moving in this range, and that will actually start testing 275 from time to time, perhaps even 250, which has been the 1 year low point in July. Next up, we have Zydrine. And here is basically the culprit. It's of course the changes that CCP has done to moon mining. It creates a lot of extra Zydrine from the relative safety of HiSec, and it's a super activity. And I do think that if you mine for Zydrine, if you mine for Megasine, you get Pyrite, you get Isogen as a byproduct. And so Zydrine is at a 1 year low point just because of the extra supplies that have been created with opening up moon mining in the 0.5 systems and in wormhole space. But the collateral damage has been Isogen and Pyrite. So Zydrine is currently selling for 424 ISK. Buyers coming in at 405. Is this a bad price? I personally don't think so, considering the extra supply, considering the relative safety now in order to acquire these resources. You're probably still okay to sell it at this price. Historically, of course, this is a terrible price, but we're in a completely different mining paradigm now. Megasite, same story, actually declining a bit more quickly in the last week or so. Currently selling for 453 ISK, and the buyers are coming in at 439. Bit more margin opening up there yet again, and I think that this is the telltale sign that this is a lot of HiSec supply. 1.5 million units, a million units, 3 million units, 4 million units, 5 million units. That is the type of thing that you get on a mine that just on a moon mine that regularly runs and blows up a chunk. You gather everything you've got, you bring it to the market, rinse and repeat. Some people will be doing that on a weekly basis. Probably I do it on a bi-weekly basis. But these are the types of volumes that you get from regular moon mining activities in Nosek, in my opinion, and they have completely dominated these markets. Now Zydrine, let's take a look at those volumes. You've got the 10 million, 9 million, 1.5 million, 3.5 million, another 3 million here, another 8 million there. So a bit easier to get than Megasite, a bit more less expensive as well. And coming in nice regular chunks. As you can see, every 24 hours we've got this nice supply of people bringing what they mined from their moons. Next up, we still have Morphite that is actually declining to a 1 year low point. That is quite interesting. 8,200 on the chart. 8,220 for the sellers, 7,700 for the buyers, substantially below 8,000 ISK. Morphite, I would say, because it is tied to the Tech 2 economy, is in a nice investment opportunity spot at this point. You can also see from the chart that it is different from the rest of the minerals, not only because it is tied to the Tech 2 economy, but also because I don't think you can just grab Morphite from a moon. I may be wrong on that, but the chart doesn't seem to indicate it, because we still have the very same pattern right below 10,000 ISK. Start looking for that buy opportunity close to 8,000 on the chart. Definitely a nice time to buy, but you've got peaks of 10, 11, sometimes even 12,000 ISK on Morphite. When there's a war, lots of Tech 2 destruction, they need to replace those ships, that's when Morphite increases in price substantially. So this, I think, is very telling. This is a nice buy opportunity. It also shows, in my opinion, that Nasdaq is in a bit of a lull when it comes to destruction and war. Next up, we have PI coming in at 20 minutes. Like that. And let's go over these. We now, I think, know that we'll need advanced PI materials for the Nasdaq infrastructure, and a completely counter move here on the broadcast notes from my perspective. Now, they are a lot smaller, and I think I saw that you need like maybe 1 or 2 of the structure components, so it's not it's definitely a lot less that you need in order to create the new upwell structures than what you need for something like a Citadel. And perhaps people are not expecting that much extra demand, because here, for instance, the broadcast nodes are down substantially all of a sudden, selling now for 2 million ISK bars, coming in at less than 1.9 million, 1.828 million ISK. That is very, very cheap. 1 year low point. Not what I expected right after ETH Vegas personally. This is either a really good investment opportunity or a sign that the market has decided that they are so cheap when it comes to creating the new upwell structures that we won't see an actual increase in demand that will impact the price enough for them, and that we see some dumping on these higher volumes. Definitely let me know in the comments what your analysis is of the situation. I personally still think that as I always say, you should never go crazy with the volumes, but I think that there will always be groups and players that are not following the news, that are not taking a look at CC, that are not following ETH Vegas closely, that will all of a sudden find themselves with a new industrial branch, and that will grab these advanced PI materials in order to make them. I may be completely wrong on that. Apparently the market here is telling me that I'm completely wrong on that, but that is my personal opinion, and if you guys have ideas on it, then definitely let me know. Construction blocks have jumped back up, so we did talk about 10k on the chart last week, I think, as a potential nice investment opportunity for construction blocks. Sellers are back up to 11,200, buyers are at 10,200. Consumer electronics still basically a bit above average, but not by too much, moving in a somewhat sideways manner. 13,200 for the sellers, 12,500 for the buyers. Decently narrow margin. Not much to say if you produce this. It's a good time to sell, but for an investment opportunity, doesn't seem to be in sight here. Coolants, fuel related, was doing quite well and is still doing very, very well, defending that 11,000 ISK price margin with everything it's got, which is a very nice point, of course, high point for the year. And a super nice recovery. 11,440 ISK for the sellers. Great time to produce coolants on a gas plant and bring them to the market. 9,000 for the buyers. Be a little bit careful though, that margin is opening up, so we do have potential for lower prices here. Enriched uranium, same thing, still strengthening up to 14,000 ISK here. 1 year high point for enriched uranium. 14,000 for the sellers, 13,000 for the buyers. Definitely in high demand. Pretty nice to be building at the moment. Integrity response drones, we have a volume spike on a 1 year low point, so we definitely have the investment, and then we have the drop off already as well. 2.3 million again, 2.4 for the sellers, a little bit less than 2.3 million for the buyers. Quite surprised. I am quite surprised by this. I thought that we would at least be able to hold on to a more than average price, but here we're back at a less than average price for the integrity response drones. Mechanical parts next going up to 12k. Maybe here now I'm thinking about what was said at ETH Vegas. I still have not watched everything, so I should definitely try to find the structure talk. But they are talking about these flex structures as being smaller in scope, faster to bring online, to bring back offline, and things like that, making them far more versatile and cheaper to make as well, of course. They're supposedly easier to destroy because they'll have less HP and things like that, but basically the way I could read this is that Nasdaq expects that they will not lose a lot of these structures, being able to, for instance, put them under the guns, not the E-war, but under the guns of other structures, will basically allow them to build them once, have their infrastructure, and then play with it without really losing too much of that actively. And as a result, they think that sure, there might be an initial rush, but after that it's done, and we won't see a sustained increased demand for these advanced PI materials because of them. I think that's a possible interpretation of eVegas. I definitely need to do my homework a little bit more on that. So mechanical part, fuel related, continuing on a really good week here, heading back for 12,000 ISK. Almost that for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. Yeah, it's a great time to be producing fuel related PI materials from planets at the moment. Nuclear reactors, well, alright, finally working its way back up to a bit more than 100,000 ISK, 111,000 for the sellers, 98,000 for the buyers. If this goes up another leg at some point, and you will have a good sell opportunity if you manage to buy for like 90k, which I did. I'm not sure if I actually still have them. I may have pulled the trigger too early. Organic mortar applicators, increased volumes and up in price. Interesting. Currently selling for 1.2 million though, nothing too crazy there. 1.1 million for the buyers. Perhaps the market is making a more thorough analysis than me and decided think that, for instance, stuff like the broadcast nodes are not needed in big numbers, but organic mortar applicators are needed more than average in the new structures. Analysis like that I have not made, unfortunately. But yeah, nice jump up here for the organic mortar applicators. You could have bought these for, well, way less than $1 million, and they're already back up to 1.1 million, 1.2 for the sellers. Next up, we've got the robotics. That is the bad news for the fuel-related items now, substantially dropping off below 100,000 ISK. 97,000 for the sellers and 75,000 for the buyers. That's where you gotta be a little careful when that margin opens up like that. You do have potential downward pressure on increased supplies here. So robotics looking like the bottom may be falling out, and coolants is primed to potentially do something like that as well, with that big gap between sellers and buyers. The others luckily are still robust, so I think we could still go either way. But this is one worrying sign for the fuel-related PI materials. Self-harmonizing power cores, alright, managing to go back to a slightly above average price, I would say. Selling for 2.3 million, buyers are at 2.2 million. Not really seeing the volume increase here either, but at least this one is up a little bit. Superconductors, still basically an average price here, 12,400 for the sellers, 11,655 for the buyers, not too much of a margin. Basically okay to produce and sell. I make these, by the way, as well. Test cultures, that one is taking off. So we had an investment opportunity about 2 weeks ago, I think, for less than 7,000 ISK. Now it is selling at 9,000 ISK. I suspect that this is a raw material that you will need to transition into the needed materials for the new structures. And that is a first spike on that one. Your buy opportunity basically is over for the sculptures. I personally still expect a second spike on the deployment of these structures, but the market doesn't agree with me on the wetware mainframes either. Look at that, definitely below average, you know, 2.3 to 2.4 million should be an average price. We're still selling for less than 2.3 million, buyers coming in at 2.2 million. Are there still deals to be made? Well, if we look at the mixed picture between, for instance, wetware mainframes and then the mortar applicators, we could still go either way. I personally think we will see a spike, but the market does not uniformly agree with that sentiment. We've been hunting for those buy opportunities throughout the summer. From time to time we saw some really nice ones, but will it pay off? Well, that is a wait and see, I'm afraid. Next up, we have the advanced moon materials coming in at 29 minutes. Like that. Let's take a look at these, the carbonites first. So crystalline carbonite did a nice little jump up to 182 and is now settling a little bit. 173 for the sellers, 170 for the buyers. Super narrow margin, and at 173 for the year it's still below average, but considering where we were a couple of months ago, it's a slightly better price, but nothing too crazy just yet here. Would I sell at this price? No. Would I buy at this price? No. Next up, Ferrite Carbide, continuing at a really low price point of just above 150. It is working its way up just a little bit. 160 for the sellers and 154 for the buyers. I still think that this is in buy order territory considering the entire chart. Next up we have titanium carbide. Same picture here, in fact coming under pressure yet again if we have buyers below 150, which we don't, 159 unfortunately, and 165 for the sellers. Yeah, buyers below 150 would be an absolute buy here. We're still at 158, so you can see we're down here on the chart on the buyers. You could, if you really want that investment, you could, I think, still make it. If you look at this entire chart, we're definitely playing in a range that is a 1-year low point. Tungsten carbide dropped off to an obvious 1-year low point. Investors made their move on this increased volume here, and so now we're still low, but not at the lowest point. 184 for the sellers, 176 for the buyers. Unfortunately, the true low points are over, but I still feel that we're trading well below average for tungsten carbide. Do I want to risk a lot of risk in that? To be honest, personally, no, because this might just be the new situation in nullsec, and add to that the raw materials coming from 0.5 systems. A lower trade range in the future may be possible. Next up we have the metamaterials. We'll start with the photonic ones, that is continuing a slow decline and is currently selling for 18,600. Buyers are at 16,500 though, if you look for that on the chart. 16,500. Let's try to create it. That's here for the buyers. That is coming into an interesting buyer territory, a massive gap opening up here as well between sellers and buyers. That's very dangerous for photonic metamaterials. They might just drop off quite sharply, and then as always, you don't want to catch a falling knife either. Trying to time that bottom could be very tricky. Plasmonic metamaterials, same thing here. The low pressure is back. Like last week, I think we were sometimes seeing increased prices, and we were hesitating on the theory that well, more moon mining opening up is basically slowly forcing us into a lower trade range. Here this week we are back in that pattern. I think 19,000 for the sellers, 18,300 for the buyers. Not as wide a margin as the photonic metamaterials, but the pressure, you can see that it is definitely there. Then we have the non-linear metamaterials trying to get back above 25,000 ISK, which is its average price. 25,500 for the sellers, 23,600 for the buyers, though 2,000 ISK margin opening up here. Hesitation, but the pressure I think just basically exists, especially if we look at the carbonites that are also definitely trading well below average. And then we also have the terahertz metamaterials that is actually trading at a 1-year low point a couple of days ago, working its way back up already. 23,000 for the sellers, but still 19,600 for the buyers. Buyers are below 20k, which is below the low point of the chart. So a buy opportunity, I think, still in the metamaterials. A couple of days ago, I think we would have done really well grabbing what was available then, because average trade price 19,450 ISK is very, very low. It's unfortunately over already, but the general pressure does seem to exist, and timing it is going to be pretty tricky. Was there one that was pronounced that was looking pretty damn good? Not on these. Yeah, the photonic metamaterials, basically with that buy order at 16,500, I think is the one where in the next few days you might want to keep a close eye on that one and try to snag the very low ones. We still have the other advanced moon materials, again with the hesitation here, so you can see the pressure in the last couple of months on the fermionic condensates, and here at the tail end we have that hesitation at around 95,000 ISK, back to 100,000 for the sellers, but 92,000 for the buyers. It's a weird one where the buyers are saying we're going lower, but then the sellers are sometimes just holding off and building their way back up to 100,000 ISK here. Kind of a weird one, but I personally do think that the pressure still exists. Ferrogel, here you can see that very sharp drop off all of a sudden to less than 45,000 ISK. Market said, hey, let's say no to that, bumped its way back up to almost 50k, but the pressure is back right there. 48,500 for the sellers, 47,000 for the buyers. They have been forced back up. The Fullerites, that is what we're talking about. Continued pressure. I made an investment on one of these dips too early. I have to admit that. Currently selling for 924. Buyers are coming in at 851. That is not great. In fact, I can see what did I buy these at 839. It's actually okay. I bought my Fullerites at 839, so I must have actually timed this dip right here. A sell opportunity. Doesn't look like that's on the horizon just yet. If you want to be able to buy close to my price point, well, 852, it's still definitely pretty low compared to this entire chart here on the buyer side of Fullerites. Next up, we have the synaptic fibers. Also, same pressure in the last couple of months here, and we're currently working on breaking 13.75, 13,900 for the sellers. But yeah, this is the thing here again, that gap opening up 12,500 for the buyers. If you look at that on the chart, it's definitely quite a bit lower, and so that does show that pressure in the advanced moon materials. Nano transmitters next, flat at 5,000 ISK, but same thing, sharp drop off, recovery under pressure. The question is, where are the buyers? 4,900. Yeah, they're forced up a little bit in some of them. 5,000 for the sellers. It's an average price, so not in buyer territory just yet. Phenolic composites, that one is still the most obvious exception here, still trading well above average, recovered quite nicely from the downward trend to 2,900 ISK. The buyers are at 2,700, sellers 2,900. That one is still trading above average. And then we have the ceramic fibers that is continuing its decline now, breaking 400 ISK on the chart. Sellers at 398, buyers at 373. Continued pressure in a lot of these. And what is the other one that I was checking? Tungsten carbide. In my ticker, I've got tungsten carbide at 178. And do I have tungsten carbide? Yeah, here currently buying at 176, so you can still buy at the price that I bought it at, 184 for the sellers. That is something that I'll maybe try to incorporate, keeping an eye on the actual investments that I made. The ticker folder is pretty good for that, and we'll definitely need to take a look at the Svepels that I bought for 29 million ISK a little bit later in the show. Next up though, we are moving on to the Tech 2 ships, coming in at 3720. And well, you know, you get this mixed picture, but you still have this pressure. So I personally would suspect that we will see a general downtrend in prices in Tech 2 ships. The interceptors are still the exception, of course. The ones that are here are still bubble immune, and I think that Nelsig is still deciding which kinds of fleets they want to fly. So here the Ares is actually jumping back up a little bit, selling for, well, and then already back down. So a couple of days ago we had average prices of like 38 million ISK, and now here all of a sudden we find ourselves at 31.5 million ISK, which is the sell price, and the buyers are just below that. Still pretty damn expensive for an interceptor, but bubble immune, that costs you something. Basilisk next, after the jump up last week, this is a bit what I was expecting, right? It's a 1-year low point, volumes increase, so you've got some investments, but the continued low prices and pressure in advanced moon materials is to me indicating that we are in a lull. We've got more production than destruction, and so the pressure is back on. We're already back below 250, 253 million for the sellers, but 235 million for the buyers. Quite a wide margin there. Cerberus, same thing, jumped up last week, is already back under pressure here. 225 million for the sellers, 209 million for the buyers. Again, you can see the volume on this 1-year low point of around 200 million, but the new ships, yep, in the last 4 or 5 days are coming in and are driving the price back down from 240 to 225. This is exactly the pattern that I was expecting. Apparently in the cruiser market that's happening. In the interceptor market, it's still crazy all around as the game tries to find its way around the new meta. As you can see, another spike up to 44 million ISK for the Crow, still back down now at 31.5 million, 28.8 for the buyers. Feels quite a bit cheaper. The Guardian though is in that terrible pattern if you're looking for high prices, if you're looking for a buy opportunity. Here's the second one. So we were back down to around 210 million, volume increase driving the price back up towards 240. But yeah, it's basically unstoppable. Things are cheaper at the moment. 214 for the sellers, 200 million, almost a bit below 201 basically for the buyers. That's really cheap for the Guardian. And look at the spike potential on War, 300 million ISKs. That's a 30. That's even a 50% margin here between the high point and the low point, where we're currently buying at around 200 million ISK. I think that this is one very pronounced buy opportunity. You're dependent on nullsec action in order to get your sell opportunity, but you can see that we've had 3 to 4 of them in the last year. I think that this one makes a lot of sense. If I find the time, I might just make my move on a couple of these myself. The Heretic next, also definitely below average, trying to work its way back up, sometimes above 70 million, but yeah, now it's getting trickier. 69 for the sellers, 58.7 for the buyers. The Hound Stealth Bomber also coming back under pressure. My interest is where the buyers are at. 28 for the sellers, 27 for the buyers, still a bit too high for me. I'm definitely looking for buyers below 25 million in the Stealth Bomber market. You can see the potential here of 35-40 million does exist, and that's a great margin again to be looking for. The Ishtar, same story with most of these cruisers, where I think we don't have as much of speculative problems like with the Interceptor. So here went to a 1-year low point of around 240 million ISK. Worked its way back up a little bit, but the pressure is back on. 245 for the sellers, 236 for the buyers. Manticore Stealth Bomber, very interesting. Average now a little bit below 30 million, but sellers still at 32, buyers just below 30. On the chart, this is a buy opportunity. You're grabbing some below 30 million. The potential here, 40-45 million does exist. It's basically a bit more expensive than the other stealth bombers. I would say Manticore, yes, as long as you stay below 30 million ISK. Munin next, that is back in the meta, apparently in nullsec, and White was requested to bring this one in the general Tech 2 segment. Went down to 220 million ISK, worked its way back up to 320 on the chart. That is quite volatile and is now back under pressure at 276.5 million. Look at the last 24 hours, full front page of sellers, and you can see that the availability is quite nice at the moment for the Munin, so that price is back under pressure. Are we at a buy opportunity just yet? No, I don't think so myself. Here, yeah, 220. Gotta see lower buy orders than this, in my opinion. The Nemesis continuing to hover around 30 million ISK. You can see that buyers at 25 million has to be possible. They're still at 27, sellers at 30, so that's still too early for me. Oneros, yeah, continuing the pressure here. 1-year low point, breaking the 180 million mark. 179.8.9 for the sellers, but 165 for the buyers. If we look for 165 on the chart here, see if I can create that. Yeah, not like that, but yeah, it's basically below this entire chart. 165 million for the buyers of the Oneros. That is very, very cheap. Also, in my opinion, like the Guardian, a buy opportunity. Just as always, don't go crazy with the volumes. You can see what the sell volumes are here. They're not that great. I would say Oneros, maybe 1, maybe 2. If you're feeling greedy, Guardian, that's a bit better. 50 is doable. Here you could definitely look into 2, maybe 3 Guardians, in my opinion, as an investment, but don't buy 50 of them. That's a little bit crazy. Next up, we have the Purifier then, selling for less than 30, but yeah, unfortunately not at the low point yet either. 28 million for the buyers is too high for me. Then we've got the Saber holding above 70 million. There's not much to say here. That is basically a pretty decently average price, a bit below that at the moment. Obviously we're under pressure, but nothing too pronounced on the buy opportunities. Scimitar also holding at above 230. 231 for the sellers, 212 for the buyers is pretty low, but it's not the 1 year low point either, so I'd be hesitant. And then the stiletto is hovering at 32.5 million. 32 million for the sellers, 29.5 for the buyers. So very interesting week in my opinion. The pressure is shining through, and I do think that there are buy opportunities. I personally like where the Guardian is at. I like which one was completely dropping off. I like the Oneros, but again, don't do too many of those. And the Manticore actually looks really nice as well, with buyers below 30 million ISK. It's all risky. As always, don't go too crazy with your volumes, but there are definitely, in my opinion, nice purchases to be made in the Tech 2 ship market this week. Next up, we have the Tech 3 ship market coming in at 44.50. All right, let's go. And you might already have been able to tell from the ticker, Tengu, nice jump up for another 9% almost. So let's see if it's a uniform thing that's happening. Here is the Confessor working its way up to 36.5 million on the chart, 37 for the sellers, 32 for the buyers. Obviously, that bottom forming is starting to happen here. They are up substantially in price all of a sudden. I wonder what's happening. I really don't know what would trigger this, and my idea personally would be perhaps some sort of rumor flying around of some Tech 3 balancing or something like that happening, or some more balancing that's actually going to put these guys more front and center. Or is it pure speculation? It's very difficult to say, but the Confessor is up. Look at what the Tengu's been doing. That's kind of crazy. I'm feeling like you may just want to sell what you've got at the right time here. It's going to be tricky to do, but yeah, Hecate holding at 45 million ISK. You can see that we could have bought these for 35 million pretty easily. 45 for the sellers, 41.3 for the buyers. Definitely up in price, up in volumes as well, a little bit on average. So looking like they're back in vogue a bit more. Here's the Jackdaw, worked its way up to 40 million as well, and 35 million. You could definitely have bought some at that price. I think I did so myself, but before the ticker thing. So 40 million for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers. I should really look at the volumes. No hundreds to be seen, no hundreds to be seen, and definitely no hundreds to be seen. So I think that the Confessor is going to continue to go up in price, might join the others around 40 million ISK. And yeah, we're not really seeing that oversupply problem. Here is the Zwepel. You can see from the ticker, maybe I should just leave that open. Not sure if that's an idea that I could do, but yeah, I bought Zwepels at 29 million. I think 3 of them or some, or maybe even 5 of them. I think I might have gotten greedy on that one, seeing that dip at a 1 year low point. And look where we're at, back up now, 38 million for the sellers, 34.7 for the buyers. That means that I can get an easy like 7 to 8 million profit on trading Zwepels. Now, should I pull the trigger? That's always the real question, of course. We'll take a look at the volumes on that. Yeah, there are not that many of them. So if everything else is going back up, I might actually wait a week and try to sell them at an even better price than this. But the tactical destroyers obviously up in price. The volumes are drying up. We're not seeing 200, 300, 400 of them on the seller sides anymore. And prices are up quite substantially. I hope you guys managed to grab some nice ones like I myself did here on the Zwepel for less than 30 million ISK. Next up, we have the cruisers. Here's the Legion up in price all of a sudden to above 160 million ISK, 169 for the sellers, 146 for the buyers. What I find interesting here is you're not seeing 150 of them, you're not seeing a round price, you're actually seeing some competition, you're seeing some market forces driving the price to the current range here all of a sudden. Volume increase is there as well, so pretty big Tech 3 investment all of a sudden, and the price is up to 169 million ISK all of a sudden. Loki went already up last week here, so he's currently trading for 223 million ISK. Again, volume-wise, nothing crazy. 210 for the buyers, the most expensive Tech 3 ship, I think, at the moment. The Proteus, look at that, 1 year low point, less than 130. A couple of weeks ago, now already selling for 190 million. Basically, we're running out of them. How many of them are selling? Well, actually 50 a day. That's not so bad. That is a missed trade on my part. That was another, just like with this Zwepel, chart, this was an obvious 1 year low point, so you should have tried to grab some for less than 130. You could have easily done so on a couple of days, and now you'd be looking at selling them very easily for 180 million or something like that. So the tech tree market, look at the Tengu as well, second leg up here, heading towards 200 million, 187.5 for the sellers. Again, volume wise, nothing too crazy, and 167 for the buyers here. The tech tree market up in price substantially, and I think that right now, unfortunately, the bottom prices are over, and that it is time to look for selling your investments at the right time. And that's going to be a tricky one. That is definitely, in my opinion, a difficult one to do. Should I have the patience? Because this increase in price here now happened on zero nullsec action that I know of. This is either speculation or someone knows something about rebalance that's coming in the pipeline for ETH. But that does mean that potentially, if a war does break out during this winter, you've got an even better sell opportunity that might be on the horizon. That is the choice to be made, I think, at this point for your tech tree investments. And then for the extra product this week, we're gonna start that off at 50 minutes, let's say 50-10. Yeah, it's gonna be Dark Blood because, of course, what happened with the Crimson Harvest, where we had some crazy loot tables in the first few hours, and I do want to see if anything happened here that was substantial enough to show an impact on the market. I know for myself, for instance, that I got warp scramblers. Yeah, ooh, ouch, yeah. Look at that increase in volume, decrease in price. Normally this costs around, what is that, 100 million ISK, something like that. They're now selling for 85 million. Buyers are coming in at 72 million ISK, and that is that increased supply. A mistake from CCP in the loot table caused the Dark Blood Warp Scrambler to decrease in price by around 20%, and yeah, the volumes here, that obviously shows what happens. Here we get the same with the Warp Disruptor. In fact, normally selling for around 130 million ISK, currently selling for 110 million. So it's not too crazy, right? There's not been like unrecoverable damage to the game, but the impact on something like that on the market is absolutely huge. People trying to then sell everything that they can, grab that ISK while it is good. There is another option. I myself have not gone with all that loot to the market. Just be patient. This will be absorbed eventually, and all the extra nice little I've got, I think, a couple of scramblers and a web and some other stuff. You'll be able to sell it at a regular price at some point, I think. I do have webs. Look at the volumes as well, but much more muted. Decrease in price here was already on its way back down. Currently selling for 88 million ISK. Feels a bit low compared to this entire chart. So I myself am going to be patient when it comes to my Dark Blood drops. But let's see if it's across the board. It does seem to be. The thermal plating though is already pretty cheap, and as a result we do have increased volumes, but nothing too crazy on the price. The Tachyon Beam Laser, something like that, maybe too niche to really show what's happening. But yeah, Dark Blood Small Focused Beam Laser now selling for 3.8 million. Well, that's still okay. So it's really on the E-War things, I think, that you will see an actual activity on the price. Stuff like all of these, maybe the armor rep. Yep, the armor rep, for instance, look at that. Normally costing you 19 to 20 million ISK, now 11.5 million ISK, and that is the volume. So this again, I wanted to show you guys, maybe the heatsink, something like that as well. Look at that volume increase, not too much on the price though. This is the CCP impact on the market. It is something that is sometimes super unpredictable, like here, a mistake in the loot table causing massive amounts of Dark Blood items to drop and flood the market. You've got the impact on the price on some of the more, I would call them generic weapons, right? You can always use a scram, you can always use a web, or almost always use a web, compared to a mega beam laser. Yeah, that is, you know, so niche that that you don't see an impact there. But on the ones that have higher volumes, you do have this impact on the market that shows up. For the Dark Blood items here, I feel like it's alright. They stemmed the bleeding soon enough that I think we'll have a recovery of the prices here pretty soon, actually. Although there may be a lot more people out there like myself that have a lot more stock ready to try and eke out as much is out of the mistake that CCP made here. But I love these kinds of situations. You might also even consider this a buy opportunity, right? You're grabbing Dark Blood Warp Disruptors for less than 100 million by quite a bit. Average price is easily 130 million on this one. So is this actually an investment opportunity? That is the choice to be made, but know that I still have some ammo left as well for this market, and I suspect that I am not alone. It's a choice to make. That's what the market is all about, guys, and that's what makes ETH pretty damn cool. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this ETH talk then. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.